WAOH is brought to you in part by Ohio's #1 trusted real estate team, The Young Team, online at theyoungteam.com.
Welcome back to AOH Primetime as we continue our series talking to the good people at Summit County Children's Services, an organization that does so much to help children and families in need here in Akron and here in Summit County, where unfortunately the need is great, with over 800 kids in the system at any given time. And much of our programming hours been dedicated to interviewing foster families and talking about the need for foster parents, foster families, and respite care and volunteers. And there's a lot we can do to step up and support Summit County Children's Services in their mission. And now Liz Manga joining us right now here on the set to talk about your work. Describe let's start with your title, but then tell us what your job really entails.
I'm deputy director for the agency, one of the deputy directors, and I oversee human resources, professional development and training, and the community relations department. So I spend a lot of my time, though, in the human resources function of the agency. So hiring, recruiting, retaining staff, and I also do a lot with labor management. We have a union at our organization, and so that's where really the focus of my time is.
And you spend a great deal of time in the legal department at Summit County Children's Services, and you have a degree in law. And it's fascinating to how much work goes into a case. And some cases go a year or more in court. Mm-hmm. And there is a ton of work that happens behind the scenes from a legal standpoint. But now your role in coaching and training. So all of the social workers go through a tremendous amount of training. And describe what it takes to be a social worker, to see these situations, and then you get to coach people on how to coach families. Mm-hmm. How does this go?
It's a very important job. It serves a great purpose, but it's also a very difficult job. Staff at our agency are there trying to keep families together, but also when we can't keep families together, we have to look elsewhere for kinship placements, foster placements, but the goal is always reunifying with family. But yes, these cases can last anywhere from 30 days to 3+ years. So there is a big spectrum there, and a lot of our caseworkers do spend a great deal of time in juvenile court. I used to always say that our social workers didn't go into social work to be testifying in court all the time. But that is one of the things they have to do. So we try to be very supportive with them, get them trained up on what good testimony looks like, how to answer questions. And that's also part of just the initial training they go through. They go through it's called core training. So it is a statewide curriculum that forms a baseline for anybody who is going to be a caseworker at Summit County Children's Services. And then we supplement that with additional training and support as they navigate the first year and beyond of employment.
Speaking of, if you were speaking to a group of college students or those exploring the field of social work, what advice do you give? Because I'm sure there is in the education process this idea of what being a social worker is or what it would be like to work for Summit County Children's Services, very different than the reality of it. So what advice do you give to encourage those exploring it without discouraging them, but giving the realities of the challenges of the work? What advice do you give to young people?
I always say you got to hang in there, and you don't have all the answers. And we don't operate in a vacuum where a caseworker makes a decision on their own and doesn't process it with anybody else. We're all about group decision making and processing decisions that are going to happen with a family. So one of those things I tell them is you're not alone. So you should never feel like you're alone out there. And also, we like questions. Ask questions. We want you to learn and grow your critical thinking skills and casework skills. But also that you have to expect that every situation, you're not going to fix every situation. You don't have a magic wand. We can try and be creative, but sometimes the wins are few and far between. And we really need to celebrate those good outcomes when they do happen. And a lot of times we hear about the bad outcomes, or, the cases that didn't go maybe the way the caseworker thought they would in the court hearing. But those are not as common, I think, as the successes. But you just hear more about the ones that, don't go the way we want. So it's really just about our caseworkers feeling supported, taking those little nuggets when they can, and just trying to learn how to do the work the best they can.
Speak to what kind of counseling or resources you have for social workers who maybe need, like a first responder, need to maybe take a break, maybe I would imagine if I, knowing what I know about what goes into being a social worker and working with Summit County Children's Services, that after a period of time, you might have burnout, or you might have witnessed some things, or it just hurt you, become a counselor to families, and you probably, as a human being, you can't help but take on their challenges, and you want success for them, and if it's not happening, you take that on and own it because that's how you care for the families you're helping. What do you do for these social workers that maybe a year or two in are like, I am at the point, and I would imagine firefighters and first responders, police officers that are witnessing trauma, is the same thing for social workers.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that about first responders, because we do see ourselves, we are the first responders to reports of child abuse and neglect. And so our caseworkers do see a lot. They hear a lot. And so that can be difficult. And they do get secondary traumatic stress from that. So we have a few things that we do. We have what's called Resiliency Alliance, which are groups that we run at the agency where caseworkers learn skills that can help them be resilient as they're navigating these cases. And also hearing other people's experiences and letting them know they're not alone. They're not the only one feeling that way. We really encourage them to have good relationships, develop relationships with their peers and with the supervisory team, because a lot can be done in those settings. Venting, but just knowing other people are going through similar things and understanding how they came out the other side. The other thing that we have is we do offer on-site mental health counseling. So it is available for really any of our staff. If they feel the need, they can schedule an appointment. It's confidential, and they can use that right on site. We also have an employee assistance program that we can refer people to as well if they would like some mental health counseling.
Let's wrap up with a discussion about the state mandate is reunification, which is the right thing. And with your background in the law department and with your degree in law, you would understand and have had so much background in this, that the caseworker wants the family to stay together and is there to offer every resource the state could possibly offer a family. And as you said, when they're going to juvenile court, they don't want to be in juvenile court. They want to be working with the family and providing those resources, and that the courts are not going to remove a child unless it's absolutely has to happen. There's all these other legal things that need to take place first. Speak to that it is a last resort and the social worker is there to help the family.
It is a last resort. It's only, we may go file for custody of a child when we don't feel that they can be in their home safely and there is not another alternative plan for them. So even sometimes they can't stay in their home, but we could do what's called a safety plan where they're staying with a family member and we're working with the parent on whatever concerns were identified to alleviate them without going to the court process. And that is really where they get the opportunity to do hands-on social work. And we want to be there doing that. But there are those times then when we do have to file to remove a child, or we feel court oversight is necessary, even if the child's in the home, just to make sure that the family follows through with services that are being recommended. And so when we do go to that court process, it is long, it is drawn out, but our caseworkers are still able to do social work. So once a child is removed and the court does get involved, there is what's called a case plan. It is adopted by the court. It is sets forth on there what are the concerns with the family, what are the risks to the child, and what are we asking family members do to reduce the risk to the child so that they could return home safely. So always with an eye on that. And when we can't reunify with a parent, then our next course is to look at relatives and kin. Last resort is to have to try to place a child in a foster home and end up being adopted. We always look to reunification when possible and then kinship, because we know that kids are better off when they're with family members.
Sometimes there's burnout, and sometimes you've stuck with this for this has been your career. Where do you find joy and fulfillment? Why do you stick with it?
I find the joy and fulfillment from knowing that it's a really noble profession. It is an important job. Someone has to do it. And I stick with it because I believe that it's an important job, but also the people and the employees at the agency, the teaming, the community partners. It's such a good feeling to be in that space because there's a lot of collaboration. I've built wonderful relationships with people at the agency over time, and that is really probably the other thing that keeps me there.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for all you do, and thanks for being with us here on the program. And thank you for watching as we continue our series of putting the spotlight on the good people and the great things happening at Summit County Children's Services to serve our communities, to serve children, to serve family in needs. And of course, the needs are great. And if you'd like to step up, look at ways to volunteer or get involved, visit summitkids.org. A lot more coming up here on WAOH. Stay with us.